What's up, guys? Going live. Dustin Gut Check Myers, my man over in Ohio. Looking forward to doing some Q&A. Pulling this to the Strong Life podcast. Probably go about 30 minutes. There he is. There's the man of the hour. The Tower of Power. Let's go. All right.
Well, I don't know if you could accurately call me the tower of anything. Now, back in the day, I was, 5'9.25". So I was just barely over that 5'9" mark. Well, after 3 compressed discs, I'm a solid, 5'8.5". So I've lost 3/4 of an inch already. I don't know what's going to happen by the time I'm, 60, 70 years old. I might even be under 5'8". So tower of power, I appreciate it, but I don't know if it's accurate.
Look, man, most guys, you're like, hey, how tall are you? They're 5'10". They're like 6'1".
Right.
At least you're honest.
Well, here's the thing. I've been short my whole life. I was really short when I was young. I was the kid growing up that was the smallest kid in my class every year. And then I hit puberty kind of late, like 9th grade. So even, until high school was when I kind of got to a normal height. So growing up, I was really small. So once I kind of accepted, hey, I'm probably going to be a small person my whole life, like the height thing never bothered me. I never got the whole like wanting to be taller thing. It never really mattered to me, So
just be you, my man. And what's interesting is you and I, we work with so many wrestlers, so we see you and I probably tend to get a lot of that undersized wrestler who is entering high school. The lightest weight class is 106 and he weighs 86 pounds. And they're like, all right, we're 30 pounds behind and we got like 4 months to make it happen.
It's funny too, because it's funny you mentioned that. So my son is 8 and he wrestled this year for the first time. And, he loved it and everything. But the lowest weight class for youth is 45 pounds.
Yep.
And most of the kids that are in the 45-pound class, they're kindergartners. They're 5 years old maybe. He only weighed 42, so he was even undersized at 45. Yep. And he's 2 and 3 years older than a lot of kids in that weight class. So he's gonna be short and small probably most of his life. But as you and I both know, height only means so much. It's just another stat like anything else. And developing strength and understanding how to use your body will go much further than your size and your stature.
Yeah, listen, and what's interesting is my son is the opposite. He's 11. He's bigger than I was as a freshman in high school.
Wow.
So what's interesting is like there's the genetic factor and then there's how do kids eat. And like I was trying to explain to my kids, my daughter was asking me how I ate and how I trained when I got into like that age 13 or so when I started working out. And I was like, look, Daddy never ate junk because it was never even in the house. We never had potato chips in the house. My parents might buy like one thing of cookies and that was it. Like for the week, maybe 2 weeks. It wasn't like we had an abundance of that stuff. And so I made my breakfast. My dad would make my lunch always the night before. And then my mom always made home cooked meals. We never went out. So it's such a different dichotomy, like the way my kids eat. And my parents and I was born in Israel. We moved here when I was a year old, but my parents grew up in another country where going out to eat was just not normal.
Well, and that type of thing was probably looked at as a luxury in your household.
Oh yeah.
And I think in certain ways, growing up in my house, my parents were pretty health conscious. They were into working out, but I think kind of the nutrition stuff they instilled in me when I was young was probably more just out of necessity than anything. When I was growing up, the only time I would ever have pop, or you guys probably call it soda on the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
We would only have pop if we went to like a birthday party or something. And part of it was, my parents probably thought it was unhealthy, but the other thing is they looked at it as an unnecessary expense. They weren't gonna, we were a blue collar family. My dad worked in the mill when I was young. My mom was still in nursing school, hadn't made it through that yet and hadn't started her career. So, we had things we needed, but money was tight. So for them to waste money on, junk food or, Mountain Dew, they weren't gonna spend money on that because they knew there was really no value in it.
Yeah.
And, maybe if we would have had lots of extra cash, I would have ate a lot worse and I wouldn't have developed, good habits growing up. I don't know.
What was your first job, Dustin? What was your first, what did you do as a kid for work?
Okay, so well, I'll get to my first official job here in a second, but from a young age, and this is probably true with a lot of entrepreneurs, and probably I'd like to hear your story in a second too, probably true with yourself. I was always very industrious from a young age. I always wanted to try to find ways to make money because I knew since we didn't have lots of extra money, and again, I'm not trying to make it sound like I grew up poor or anything like that. That wasn't the case. We just didn't have the extras. So I think, when I was a kid, I wanted more comic books, so I would think, okay, well, how can I get these comic books? So recycling was real big in the 80s. So I would walk up and down our country roads when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old with a garbage bag and collect pop cans and bottles that people had thrown out of their cars. And I would walk for miles and I would collect them and crush them, and I can remember, you could cash in aluminum cans for like 20 cents a pound or whatever. And I would collect them, spend maybe a month until I had enough, garbage bags full that my dad would have to use his pickup truck and he would take me to the recycling center. I'd cash them in and I'd make, $20 or whatever. And then I'd be able to go, then he'd take me to, Lawson's and the Dairy Mart on the way home where they had a little, comic book thing and I'd get to buy some comic books. So that was kind of my first experience with like making that connection of if I put in this amount of work, I can have some money to buy these extra things that I don't necessarily need, but that I want. And, so that was the first thing that I really remember doing outside of the house. Within the house, I had to wash dishes every week. I had to take out the trash. Me and my sister switched days on that. And we had a horse. My mom had a horse when I was growing up, just one. But I had to shovel horse shit.
Yeah.
And that was probably my first, physical job. And I'll tell you what, I hated it. I remember my lower back would burn so bad and my grip, from holding on to the shovel. And I think I was too young to really make the connection that it was actually making me strong because I didn't lift weights or anything yet. I was still a little kid.
Where were you in Ohio? What town were you in?
Yeah, so just outside of Steubenville. So Steubenville, Ohio is right there on the river. It's an old Rust Belt, steel mill town, just about south of Youngstown, about 45 minutes, and west of Pittsburgh, about 45 minutes.
Okay.
So I did the horse cleaning. I think I made $5 a week for doing that. But my first real job was at 16, Corey G, who who you've had on your show before, and I was in my gym with. He got me a job because we were weightlifting partners even back then. But he got me a job washing dishes with him at Ponderosa. So that was the first paycheck.
Ponderosa was the buffet, right?
It was the buffet, and yeah.
I got a funny story about Ponderosa. This is funny.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, when we did just like all these connections you're making, in Ohio, the 80s. I mean, Ohio's always been tough wrestling. So I heard you on a live you were doing last week, maybe with Gene Zanetti, said that you didn't start wrestling until high school. That was me too, and that holds you back. You need a foundation if you're wrestling kids that started, wrestling at age 8. But when we would go to the regions after weigh-ins, there was a Ponderosa. So my brother's first time that he went to the regions, he was cutting a lot of weight. And he would normally, after weigh-ins, he'd eat an apple. But he's like, man, Mr. Pogosh took us to Ponderosa after weigh-ins. He's like, I stuffed myself. I felt like a fat piece of shit. Like he couldn't control himself. He's like, I wrestled so bad. He's like, I felt so heavy from eating the all-you-could-eat buffet at Ponderosa. So I remember him saying, he felt like a fat piece of shit.
Yeah, he probably wrestled terrible too. In that moment, he really lacked the self-control. But it's interesting because we may have talked about this before, but I don't think I knew that you started wrestling, kind of later in life. Which for guys like me and you, it's basically too late to be really good at it at that point.
It's rare that I don't want to. It's there's some guys that are. My coach said this to me recently. I worked with my coach last year. He was our assistant, very close to him. He's like, Zach, when he wrestled in the mid 80s, and then I graduated in 93. I'm a little older than you, but he's like, Zach, back then, he's like, everybody was not, there was some certain standout wrestlers with technique. He goes, but basically the kids who were like men, you know, who went through puberty early,
Right.
they dominated. He's like, they dominated people because they were tough and just so much stronger. And I remember being, you know, I went to college age 17. I turned 18 December, freshman year. But I didn't feel tough and physical till probably turning 18 or 18 and a half. And nowadays there's, you know, a lot of juniors there's seniors in high school who are 19. I was a junior in college at age 19. You're a different, you know, you're a young man. And so when I started wrestling, that whole freshman team, they had been wrestling since first or third grade. So I had to wrestle off to try to make the freshman team. There's not even freshman team in high schools now.
Right.
So, you know, when I heard you saying that, I was like, man, he's right. You got to get this foundation early. And I didn't lift weights until the end of, it was like 2 weeks before 8th grade ended. And I trained the wrong way, you know, and so I didn't have.
Well, the access to information was much different back then. Much different.
I used Muscle and Fitness, Flex magazine, and then any of the books were also bodybuilding magazines. And so Robert Kennedy, who was the owner, I think, of Muscular Development, which Muscular Development in the 70s and 80s was actually owned by Bob Hoffman, York Barbell. Muscular Development was, you know, even though it was a bodybuilding magazine, it was still kind of, they had powerlifting, these are all the old Ironman magazines, but Muscular Development had bodybuilding, powerlifting. They just had different, I would say, more applicable. They kind of were doing like what we did. We do powerlifting. They did a lot of gymnastics work. Once the 80s came with, you know, Hollywood, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, everything was based kind of on their training, which was Coach Pritch, I totally forgot you were from Ohio, my friend. Hey, guys. Hey, guys, we're going to try that again. We froze up a little bit. We're going to try that again. Dustin will come on in a second. Could be too many people going live since nobody's at work. That's got to be the issue, I'm thinking. All right, guys, hang tight. There's my man, Dustin. All right, Dustin, let's try to do this again. That is funny. Yeah.
All right, we're back.
I think Instagram is overloaded since nobody's at work.
I would say that's probably the truth right there, you know?
Oh, man, that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, I'm seeing people now that I follow or people that I'm friends with on Facebook and everything that have never done anything social media-wise, and all of a sudden they're doing lives every day, and they're doing, you know, even, you know, Coach Jaggers from Ohio State, you know, he's not very active on social media, except on Twitter. He'll talk about, you know, the Indians and the Cavs. You know, he talks about Cleveland sports, and that's about it. But I saw, you know, he did a Facebook Live the other day, and he's doing like an Instagram Live today. I thought, okay, Jay, now you're seeing what, you know, this type of interaction is good. You get to reach people, you get to talk, you get to kind of flesh out ideas. So,
dude, you know, guys like you and Corey G, like if I was local to you guys, I'd be hanging with you guys every day.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was telling my wife, you know, because she was like, you know, she knows I had stuff scheduled all week. She's like, oh, well, who are you going live with today? Yeah. And so I told her who you were, and I said, we're actually very similar in a lot of ways. Yes. You know, I said, you know, he's a gym owner, used to work with, you know, Rutgers and Lehigh. So he has, you know, kind of a wrestling niche. Yep. And, you know, a very smart guy, but also not a science guy. And that's how I explain myself. I mean, I think I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't call myself a science guy. I'm more meathead than science. Now, there has to be scientific principles that underlie or underpin what we do. But I think, you know, the grind of it and the fact that we are in the trenches is kind of the difference maker between guys like me and you and Corey G and maybe some of these other guys that are out there in similar spaces. So
you have I call it the coach's eye. You know, we've spent so much time, we've touched so many barbells and seen so many deadlifts and squats, and we've had it in our, you know, boots on the ground. I called it that. We have a very different coach's eye than somebody who might be in his mid-20s and is like, you know, could recite, Zatsiorsky's book or whatever, Super Training. And look, I've got all those books here, but I've also got, I love those old books. I showed you like those muscular development magazines, Iron Man. Those books to me and those magazines, that's what I wish I came across when I was younger.
No doubt, man. I think out of some of the newer stuff, one of the guys I've learned a lot from, just from reading his stuff, I don't really know him personally, but Cal Dietz up in Minnesota.
Yes.
So triphasic training, that's one of the newer, I guess it's not really that new now, but kind of newer school ways of thinking that's really influenced my training a lot in recent years. But going back to, kind of what you're talking about, the coach's eye, it reminded me of something from kind of my earlier days at the Ohio RTC. And this is back when Lou Roselli was still the associate head coach at the RTC. He's the head coach at Oklahoma now.
That's right.
But it was something, there was kind of some internal debate between him and kind of one of the, sports performance guys about running versus biking. And, the guy was trying to make the science guy was trying to make the point about, well, we're going to put him on the bike. That way we can monitor the watts and we're going to have the heart rate monitors on. And then we got to monitor the recovery and blah, blah, blah. And Coach Lou said, no. He said, I'm taking them for a run. And the guy goes, well, how are you going to monitor their output? And he said, like this. Yeah. He said, I can watch. I can know if they're giving 100% or not. He said, I've been doing this long enough. He said, I don't need a heart rate monitor. So
I like that.
I don't know if I'm completely to that end. I do think there's value in data and there's value in tracking stuff. But at the same time, you can track all the shit that you want. You can have all the data you want. You can break out a calculator for every workout. But if you don't have the coach's eye, you're not going to be able to pick up on the intangibles that are the most important part of training, in my opinion.
Yeah, I use that word all the time, the intangibles, things that it's like you can't even write about it. It's hard to write about it. You could converse about it and get people to almost like visualize it. And that right there is the art of coaching. It's a blend of the science, and then it's a blend of what they need, emotionally, mentally, that really takes them from good to great, that makes somebody tough. And being able to know, the effort with running, or I remember kind of the best assessment for me was just watching the guys compete. So if I saw a guy who would regularly lose by 1 point or in overtime, I knew he had to get tougher. I knew he needed like an extra gut check workout, circuit, something at the end of his training so he could learn to get that comfortable being uncomfortable, being comfortable under fatigue, so that it had a carryover to when his body and arms and legs felt heavy at the end of a third period. It's so mental. And so
I think typically if you're seeing guys consistently losing 1 point matches or overtime matches, it's probably not, on some levels it may be a conditioning aspect, but at any time in an overtime match, both the guys are tired. They're both going to be fatigued. So that is where that kind of mental edge comes in. And, so when someone's losing, consistently losing close matches or overtime matches, it is more of a toughness thing. The physical toughness and the mental toughness side of it. So, no, I think you're absolutely right there. And I use a lot of stuff that I've used forever, and I'm always constantly trying to learn new stuff as well, and I'm experimenting. But what would you say, in the past, and I know you're probably pretty similar in that way, you draw from a lot of different things. In the past 10 years, what do you think, from 2010 to 2020, what's been the biggest difference in the way you approach training your athletes and the way you approach training yourself? Two-part question, then I'll get my answer to it.
Yeah. So with regards to training athletes, I've seen a big difference in how they show up, meaning less and less physically prepared, because they're not doing things like shoveling horse shit or simply doing, kids don't even mow their own lawn anymore. They're not out playing. So I've learned to stop assuming that a high-level athlete is going to be able to come in and crush it in the weight room, crush it in the gym. They're just high-level athlete is not a high-level lifter. That's number one. Number two, I've gotten better at kind of having multiple personalities myself during each group. So I call it like that.
Instead of treating every athlete the same way or whatever.
Right. They all need, it's like that movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler. I call it like it's 50 first strength and conditioning dates within the
50 first lifts
within the same hour. Meaning Some guys respond to me more aggressively the way I speak with them. Others don't respond like that, and so I kind of have to give them a little quiet whisper. Other kids have gotten over inundated with information, or they fell in love with watching somebody. Maybe they watched George St. Pierre training. Now that's the only way they believe in training. And so for them to buy into the training, I have to incorporate some sort of gymnastic drills, and so they don't all think the same. And it tends to usually be the higher level guys. Now, you were at Ohio State, where the majority of the team they were, all Americans. You had a handful of national champs there. So the higher they go up, the more eccentric each person tends to have these little habits. So I've learned to kind of have a generalist approach and be ready to give the kid what he wants that makes him believe in his training. Dave Tate hopped on. I'm not sure if he's still there, but Dave conversed. I had conversed with him about this in like the early 2000s. People, the early days of functional training, people were like, well, benching is not functional. When are you on your back? A wrestler shouldn't bench, or I'm not on my back. Well,
I can remember my high school coaches saying the same thing.
Right. Well, guess what? If you love the bench and it gets you confident, it makes you feel stronger. Confidence is one of the most crucial, transfer of training in an athlete, because if you don't believe in yourself, forget it. So I've learned to give them things that build their confidence, whether it's, quote unquote functional or not. And so a lot of the times they want arm work, they want to do curls, they want that chest work. So for me, I've learned to become more of a chameleon in my coaching for the people. And then for me, 10 years ago, I was 34 and I didn't have any problems with my knee or shoulder or anything. I was almost feeling like I was in my prime. I could deadlift over 500 and I could go and run a 5-mile, road race on the weekend. And I felt great. And so now with some of my injuries, I've really learned some unique training methods. And I've, like for example, when I bench, I use the Rhino barbell bar. I don't use the straight bar. In fact, most of the training I do, or even for the athletes, is predominantly like a Swiss bar. It's a specialty bar. Right. So what I'm trying to do with the athletes is give them longevity, because you and I have seen this, because you and I have worked with youth up to Olympic guys. And so we've seen that sometimes it's not the best who keeps going, it's who is the healthiest. Right. And so I'm trying to really push for longevity. So when I press, I'm using that barbell bar, and then I take like a little gymnastics mat and fold it up under my back. I stole that from Donnie Thompson. Lets the scapula move really well. And
keeps it from getting bound up at the bottom.
That's right. Keeps it from getting like grinding into a crappy bench or the hard floor. And I'm really, conjugate style with my selection of exercises to avoid the overuse, of anything. So for me, that has been a big change, really more and more into the specialty bars. And then with the kids, just being a chameleon with anybody I train, because ultimately I've learned that, like, if it doesn't matter if I'm following the quote unquote best scientific program, if they don't believe in it, forget it. It does nothing,
Oh, I totally agree. If you don't have their buy-in, then you can have the best, quote unquote, best program in the world, but if they're not bought in, if they're not enthusiastic about training, they're not going to make any progress. So, no, I definitely agree with what you say about being a chameleon.
One more thing, Dustin, that I forgot, because this happened about 10 years ago. My early days of coaching, I honestly coached athletes to just win. That was all I spoke to them about, was like win, dominate, destroy, very Terminator-esque. And it may have been 8 years ago, something like that. One of the kids we trained was murdered. And all state wrestler, all area football. And he went for, I think, a semester up at that Iowa Central Community College. You probably train kids who go there. That's like a prep for the Division I level. And it's like, I think to myself, I'm like, I don't even remember like, did I even talk to that kid about his family? Like, I can't remember. And he was very quiet. But I just look back and like, I realized I didn't talk to him about life. And then, you know, we lost a wrestler at the high school I coach at a couple weeks ago. This kind of quarantine lockdown time is giving kids sometimes too much freedom. And so it's just a reminder to me, like my early days, I was just training everybody to win. And you know, now, of course, that's important. I'm not training people to just be good. I'm training them to win. But I really get into the life aspect of things about how this, you know, that's why I kind of asked you, like, you know, I knew that you, not knowing where you worked, but knowing your work ethic now, I knew you did hard stuff as a kid. And so I'm always trying to find ways to blend training with life. So whenever I close out a training session, especially at my high school, I talk to the kids. I go, it's not just about excellence in the weight room or sports. It's excellence in your academics, your social life, the way the teachers think about, what does your teacher say? What kind of kid are you? You know, because if a recruit comes in here and asks me about you, I want to be able to talk about your leadership, your effort, your punctuality, your behavior outside of here. Not, are you the best athlete? And so, you know, to me, that has been a change for me, is to get more into the, I think like this, Dustin, because you're a father. I go, the way I'm coaching, is that what I want my son and daughter to experience? Do I have energy? Do I talk to them about life? Do I talk to them about school and academics and social life? Or do I just show the technique and do this? And that's the workout. And so I always say, if I was looking in right now and my son was getting coached, my daughter was getting coached, and I was, you know, the coach, does that make me proud of who is doing the work? And that's what I also tell my coaches, you know, my team, is I go, if that was your child, is that the effort you would want given to your child?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. And it's a huge responsibility when someone entrusts you to work with their kids. You may have as much contact, you know, with their kids over the course of a week as they do. You know, if you see them after school for 2 hours, how many days a week or whatever. So I've really gotten real conscious of that, especially once I, you know, started a family, you know, 10 years ago. I thought, all right, I have mostly, you know, when I'm training, you know, junior high and high school wrestlers, even the guys into the college ranks, I have them at a very impressionable time, not just about their work ethic and their technique and how much effort they put in the gym, but I want them to follow me in a way where they come away from this experience wanting to be a good husband, wanting to be a good father to their kids someday, you know, wanting to have that family union. So that's why I always make a case of, like, you know, I always show that I'm respectful to my wife, that I spend time with my kids. And so I want to showcase that for them, and not, you know, maybe some of them have that example at home, but maybe some of them don't. Yes. Or maybe some of them have that example at home, but maybe whatever rapper they like right now or whatever, they don't see that type of thing. So I always try. That's why in my bio, the first thing it says is family man, because I value that above anything. So I think you hit the nail on the head as far as, you know, it's not just about training them in the weight room. You're essentially training these athletes, you know, for life. You know, and I'll kind of expand on my answers too, but before I get into it, you actually reminded me of a very funny story. All right. So when you were talking about being a chameleon and treating each athlete differently, I got a great story about this. So, you know, rewind probably 5 or 6 years ago. This would have been, you know, kind of my earlier days at the Ohio RTC. And I think it was after I was there maybe 2 or 3 years. And it was the first summer that Tom kind of handed me the keys of the college program. So I'm working with the college guys, and I'm excited. I mean, I'm pumped. And, like, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to transform the way Ohio State wrestling is perceived. Our work ethic, you know, there used to be this reputation that Ohio State's talented, but they're not strong or they're not in shape, whatever. I was like, fuck that. I'm going to change it. I'm going to turn these guys into dogs, you know. So we had the summer lifting, and the freshmen that reported early, you know, Keyshawn Hayes and Colin Moore and those guys, they're in there. And, you know, right away, those two in particularly, I really liked, because these guys work hard. They love to lift weights. You know, me and Colin really hit it off right away. And me and Keyshawn, I felt like I hit it off with him, but he's kind of a quiet kid, you know?
Yeah. Where are those guys? Are they Ohio guys, both of them? Were they grew up in Ohio?
Colin's an Ohio guy. Keyshawn was from Kansas City.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. So he's a Kansas City guy, but he came in, super smart kid, hard worker, athletic freak. I mean, he could do muscle ups nonstop. Had real good weightlifting technique too. He'd done a lot of CrossFit, and which, you know, sometimes I'm not a fan of CrossFit, but must have had a good CrossFit coach. He had excellent weightlifting technique coming in and stuff. So right away, I was like, oh, this Keyshawn kid, you know, he's kind of quiet, but I love him. Right. I was like, but I'm going to get in his ear every day, and I'm going to get him fired up, right? So you got to figure this summer, I got control over them. They're coming in early and lifting. I got, you know, Wu-Tang blaring on the speakers every day, and I'm in there, I'm barking, hoo, 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 you know, I'm getting these guys all fired up. And this is after we're maybe like 6 weeks into our first, you know, kind of summertime lifting thing. And it was the day I think we programmed up to max out on back squat. So Keyshawn, he's a good squatter. He's getting ready to go. And I'm in his ear. I'm like, you better fucking get this, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've been putting in this work. You're going to make it. You're going to make a splash in college wrestling. I'm on him. So I can't remember what was on the bar, maybe. And it was, you know, 385, 405, something. It was a lot of weight for a 18-year-old 141 pounder. So he gets under the bar. I'm behind him to spot him. He goes down. He starts coming up. And very uncharacteristic of him, he loses his footing and stumbles back and almost falls. And I catch him. Luckily, I was right on him. I catch him and help him get up. We almost lost the weight. We racked, and I just kind of looked at him. I was like, what the hell was that? What happened? And he looked me dead in my eye. He goes, it's you. It's your voice. I can't stand when you yell at me. Just shut up. Don't try to motivate me. Spot me and tell me what to do. He's like, but I can't stand when you yell and you're cussing, blah, blah, blah. I was shocked. I was like, oh, I felt like my heart stopped. Like, oh my God.
Yes.
Like, I felt like one of my kids just told me they liked their mom better than their dad or whatever. I was like,
yep.
And I felt like a fool. And it was like a reality check for me. I was like, you know what? I should have known right away. This kid's he's a hard worker, but a quiet kid. He doesn't want someone barking at him. He doesn't want someone yelling at him and cussing at him. Maybe someone else wants that and needs that, but this kid doesn't. And that was really one of the first times it kind of opened my eyes to like, hey, even if I think this is the right way, that might not be the right way for that kid. And also, I can maybe still have these two kids do the same workout, but I got to bring it to them differently. So, Keyshawn, if you're listening, you helped me grow as a coach.
You know, that's so funny is I remember when I was at Rutgers, we had two groups. We had 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. And I think it was like my 9 a.m. group. I was like, man, these guys just, the energy's not there. They're not all pumped. They just wasn't coming together. So I was like, I'm going to train with them, and then I'm going to like beat them during the workout, and I'm going to just like smoke them. And they got fired up when I was training with them. Then Coach Goody was training at 9 a.m. Then the other coaches, and I was like, man, even though I didn't like that they needed us to train with them to get fired up, I was like, that's what works. That's what it takes. And I remember speaking with our head associate coach, Donnie. He's like, Zach, this is your program. If you think that that's what's needed to be done to get them to put in the effort that's required, he goes, then that's what you got to do. I go, Donnie, man, like rule number one in college wrestling or college strength conditioning is you do not train with the athletes. He goes, this is your program. If you think that's what is needed to be done, then that's what you got to do. And so Donnie and I would always talk about this kind of art of coaching, about times where maybe he struggled as a wrestler and what he needed from the coach or what he needed from his training partners or what he needed to do himself. And we would always get like deep into these conversations. I always love this kind of stuff because I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of coaches out there who sound smart, but when I watch them coach, they don't command the room. They don't have a change of personality to each individual kid or each individual group, right? Like 8 a.m. is pumping. 9 a.m. needs me to do some work with them to get them pumping. You know, sometimes that's what it takes, and that's what we got to do. And so that has also been the most exciting thing for me with training and coaching these past 10 years is learning. I've really immersed myself get my boots on the ground, coaching more. And so I just learned better that way. Of course, I love the books. I've got the books surrounding me everywhere, but I learned the most from coaching. And that's why anybody who interns with me, step one is you're going to train. You're training with us.
No, I I wholeheartedly believe I don't care if you did it 20 years ago, if you don't do it yourself right now, you're not going to have the same connection to the programming and to the athletes and how to motivate them. And sometimes now, I train with the athletes. Sometimes like my high school kids, the groups are too big. I don't actually train with them. But you better believe the workout they're doing that day, I may have done it earlier in the day. So yeah, that's always going to be a pillar of my coaching is I'm going to be in the trenches with them. And no one can ever convince me that that's not important or that's not crucial. And I know at the university level that's frowned upon, but you're never going to be able to tell me that someone can be as effective as a coach by just learning it, implementing it, on paper. I don't believe it. And right. No one will ever be able to convince me of that.
A lot of coaches are, hey, I'm on my program. Even the interns I've had, hey, you're going to train with this group today. Oh, I front squatted today. I don't want to hear it. How are you going to learn doing you'll never know what it's like, what they're experiencing unless you do it. And if you really want to learn, you're going to be open-minded. It's kind of shocking to hear coaches who just, I'm on this program, I'm on that program. Why don't you test drive the athletes program that you're programming?
Like, don't you believe in your program?
Yeah, get on your program. And so the difference too is, so are you 40 yet, Dustin, or no?
Yeah, I'll be 41 in 5 weeks.
Nice. Okay, yeah, brother. So happy birthday. So you started training. You and I started probably lifting weights around age 13. Is that when you started? Roundabout?
Yeah, 12 years old was when I started. Consistently.
28 years. So 28 years of training. Let me tell you something. I know I'm going to sound like a dick here, but there's college strength coaches who are 26. If I've been training longer than you are alive, even if the training was wrong, I've got a coach's eye. I've experienced touching that bar so many hundreds of thousands of times. I have a different experience than you do. And so experience of training, that's why Dave Tate calls it under the bar. You've felt it, you've been in it and you have a different eye. And so I think that my experiences are even my injuries are what have helped shape me to be a better coach.
No doubt, man. I mean, you have to have a love for the training itself, not just training in the sense of like helping athletes or whatever. Obviously, that is important, but you have to love the actual physical act of training, I think. I did a sprint workout in my I got some distances marked off on my circle, like where a quarter mile starts, 200 meters, 100 meters. So I went out, I did some 200s, some 100s yesterday, and there was a woman that lives down the street, was walking her dog. I blew past her, and I'm walking back to the star, and she goes, let me ask you something. What are you training for? And before I could even say anything, she followed up. She was like, is there some type of opportunity coming up? And I said, yeah, life. Every day is an opportunity, So in my mind, like, I would be doing this whether people were paying attention on Instagram and whether I had athletes or not. Like, this is the only way I understand how to live and go about my day. And it's just part, it's so intrinsically tied into who I am as a person. And I think that's something that I think that's something that even a lot of successful coaches or guys that are trained at the university level, they may not have that. And I think with you and I are in unique situations, being a gym owner. And let me ask you this. So you guys, your gym is the underground strength gym is closed right now, right?
Yeah, we closed the middle of March. So we've been closed for like 32, 33 days now.
Yeah, we're in the same boat as well. And, we have been open since 2003. And even when we changed buildings in 2008, moved to the new location, we were never closed for a day. We had rehabbed the old building. And then the first day we started moving equipment in there, even with like the equipment we had over there, we let our members kind of go back and forth between the two gyms. So we were open year round until this happened. So it's kind of a weird thing, for there to be a health emergency. I would have never pictured like, all right, someday you're going to have to temporarily close the gym because of a health emergency. So
bro, it's like a movie.
Yeah.
It's like an old crazy movie.
Well, and we're still in it. You know what I mean? It's the movie's not over yet. So
I know
it's going to be interesting.
Right. So what do I see at home? You've got the pull up and parallel bars you've built in the backyard. And then,
so I got my bars in the backyard. I brought some heavy dumbbells down. So I got, a set of 80s and 100s in the garage and a bench, so that way I can still do some chest work and stuff in there. In the basement, one in the unfinished part here, I got my heavy bag and I got my sauna.
Nice.
And then in the finished part of the basement where we got my TV, I got my Echo bike, my ab wheels, so that way I can do my conditioning work in there while I'm watching Netflix or whatever. So, but I got kind of like 3 little mini workout areas. I can still go into the gym if I wanted. Obviously, it's my gym, but
right.
I like being home here, taking advantage of this time to spend time with the kids. And
yes,
I can just kind of dip down and get a workout in or whatever. And it's also kind of forced me to be a little bit more creative and help, deliver content to the people that are following and paying attention that are also in the same boat, So I've been trying to do a lot of home training content. And, I don't think the style of workouts I've been putting out are a replacement for my main programming.
Sure.
But, hey, if you don't have access to a weight room right now, you still need to try to get stronger. And all the push-up challenges and stuff that are going around Instagram, those are all great. I mean, anything that gets people moving and exercise is great. But, I put out a home strength training ebook that still gives some kids structure, teach them how to use time under tension on body weight movements and stuff so that they can still progress strength-wise. And, hey, what does a split look like if you're training at home and you have one set of dumbbells and body weight? You still have to have some type of structure to your training. Or I shouldn't say you have to, but you should want to if you want to continue to progress, and that when you are back in the gym, whether it's in May or June or July or whatever, that you haven't completely lost all of your strength.
Yeah, and this is going to be a interesting time for the fall sport athletes, whether it's college or high school, football especially. Somebody had posted, you probably saw it, like an image of the amount of Achilles ruptures and hamstring pulls after the NFL had a lockout. I can't remember what year that was.
No, I didn't see it. So they got their hamstrings that got deconditioned essentially.
Exactly, and then they, the lockout ends and they get right back to it, going crazy. And I've got a couple buddies who are strength coaches in the NFL, and they tell me there's a lot of guys who don't even own a pair of 25-pound dumbbells. NFL guys, they don't have home gym equipment. So I gave them like a full body weight thing that has no pull-ups even included, It's all kind of push-up and lunge and sprint variations and squat jumps and frog jumps and walking on your hands. But your legs have to be prepared. That's one thing I've been really harping on for the athletes is we have like an app that sends our training to each gym. And it's a lot of jumping, lunging, different kind of sprint work, whether it's 100s, 200s, sprint to the telephone pole, walk back. But I got to make sure legs are ready to go. A lot of kids are not going to be prepared. And if the sport coach doesn't have a strength coach to work with, we're going to see a lot of damage done to kids.
No doubt, man. I actually just did an article for Flow Wrestling that'll be up either next week or the week after. I got like a weekly spot with Flow on Tuesdays.
Good.
And what this article was about neck training at home. And, neck, obviously everyone knows neck strength is important for wrestling. But I think it's one of those areas a lot of wrestlers get away with not training their neck because they wrestle so much.
Right. That is your neck work.
Correct. So like a guy like Logan Stieber, for example, his neck came out basically past his ears.
He
never did any neck work, but it's
when
because
the neck is wider than the head. I'm so proud of them.
Yeah. So he got that neck development because from a young age, he wrestled year round all the time. So someone like that didn't need it. Well, right now, obviously I think, athletes, especially wrestlers, should always include neck strengthening stuff in their training program. Well, it's even more crucial right now because you got all these wrestlers who maybe from the time they were 5 years old have wrestled year round. Right now, normally they'd be going into freestyle season, getting ready for Fargo. They're off the mat. So when is the last time a lot of these kids have spent 2 or 3 months away from the wrestling mat? They haven't. So what is going to atrophy first? Their neck. Yeah. Now you immediately go back to wrestling in a month or two. Yeah, maybe they've been doing push-ups and chin-ups and lunges at home, but if they haven't been doing anything for the neck, that first time someone collar ties them or snaps them down, they're going to pull something or slip a disc or whatever. So
they're going to feel banged up unless there's a lot of clubs, as you know. So if if this first month returning back to sport is not like 2 weeks easy, 2 weeks moderate, if it's just hit the road running, we're gonna have a lot of kids getting banged up, and that's gonna be a problem.
No doubt, man. Well, I'll tell you, kind of shifting gears, just because this was something I wanted to ask you about. What do you think of the song I picked for the banner I put up on my story?
Yeah, what was the song again?
It was Whiplash by Metallica.
That's right. Yeah. So I love that song.
I knew you would, and the reason I thought of it is because yesterday, I always talk about how I, grew up listening to East Coast rap, and that's true. But yesterday, my son asked me. He said, he's 8 years old. He said, "Daddy, what was your favorite songs when you were my age?" And I almost said Biggie and Wu-Tang and stuff. Then I thought about it, like, wait a minute. No, when I was 8 years